Hello, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. Thank you for joining our next panel session, The Connected Enterprise. I have three wonderful panelists with me here today, and they are going to introduce themselves. So Bashir, if you could go first, and then Pablo, and then Corey, then we'll start our discussion.
Great. Hi, Aaron. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Aaron, Z Prime, Pablo, and Corey, for having me part of this panel. It's great being here. My name is Bashir Sarani. I'm the CEO and CTO at a company called Avertra. Avertra, we're a very small boutique organization that focuses on technology for the utility industry. Our mission statement is simplify life. And in this world of digital transformation, there's a lot of complex things that people face, whether it's from process design or user experience or customer experience. And our goal is to simplify that as much as we can. So it's an honor being here and looking forward to learn from this panel.
Thanks a lot, Bashir, and thank you, Aaron and Z Prime and everyone that is joining us today. It's exciting to be on this panel and to be having this conversation with you all. My name is Pablo Vegas. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for NiSource and the President of NiSource Utilities. NiSource is an integrated gas and electric utility. We're headquartered out of Merrillville, Indiana. That's Northwest Indiana. We have 6 local distribution gas companies across the Midwest and the Northeast, and we have 1 hybrid gas electric business in Indiana. So I'm excited to be here, excited to talk about digital, how to simplify my life. Bashir, I love the mission of your company. I'm excited to learn how to simplify my life, hopefully personally as well as business-wise, and looking forward to the conversation with you all.
Thank you, Aaron. Good to be here. Thanks for having us on the panel. Good to see Pablo and Bashir and be on the panel with you too. My name is Corey Kaczynski. I'm the Interim Vice President of Strategic Pricing and Enterprise Risk with CPS Energy. For those that don't know CPS Energy, we are the municipally owned electric and gas utility. We serve San Antonio and some of our surrounding counties. We've been owned by the city for a little over 75 years at this point. It's been a great investment for the city of San Antonio, and look forward to this discussion today.
All right, thank you all. So Bashir, I want to start the conversation with you and defining a term that the audience may hear throughout today's panel discussion, and that is design-based thinking. Can you define what that means?
Great question. And I know there's a lot of jargon and terms and acronyms being thrown around as part of this new space and digital experience. So let's try to simplify this here, right? So at its heart, design thinking is human-centered design that really focuses on the wants and the needs of the user. And that user could be either a customer, an agent, a field technician, a meter reader, a third-party agency that works with the utility, right? So design thinking at its core is really a holistic framework that is used to generate personalized experiences by persona across the different new construction to cash journeys, right? So while design thinking is a framework, the output of that basically is a set of artifacts impacting processes, tools, as well as designs that aim to improve overall CX and UX. Well, what is CX and UX, right? There's a lot of confusion around those terms as well. So UX is user experience, and that's really mainly the design and development of a single customer or agent or employee touch point. And the goal would be, as part of that improvement, is to make a significant touch point easier and more enjoyable to use. Now, customer experience, or CX, is really the design and implementation of all the touch points across channels, and that basically cover an entire journey, right? And really a goal of a great CX is to increase overall customer satisfaction, loyalty, advocacy, and so on. So in the case of the utility industry, a good command of user experience would basically be, a customer coming onto your website, finding what I need, being able to navigate around, being able to enroll in a different program in 5 clicks or less. And that basically attributes to a great user experience, because I was able to serve on my own and be empowered and be able to support my need and work in a very easy to use, lovely environment. Now, let's say while I was on this site, I was presented the opportunity to ask a chatbot a question and to get some additional information about my bill or another available program. And during that exchange with the chatbot, maybe we hadn't trained it enough, and now I need a human agent to be part of this conversation. And the chatbot recommends that, it passes me to a human agent and gives me a number to call. Now, if I call that number and I'm greeted by the IVR, and the IVR has no context of why I'm actually calling, and it's asking me again to identify myself, and then passes me again to an agent, and the agent asks me the question, how can I help you? Well, technically, I just told your chatbot what I was looking for, and the utilities chatbot asked me to call you. So shouldn't you know why I'm calling, right? So while there was a great user experience by providing chatbot, by providing a modern web experience, by providing certain self-service, I was stuck on an IVR. I had to re-identify myself. I was waiting. And then when the agent actually responded, they really didn't know why I was calling. And that's really where there would be a failure of customer experience, or CX, right? So, all in all, UX, CX, and design thinking are very different, but they're really interrelated at the end too, right? So each plays a pivotal role in the success of the other. And, utilities today really need to start looking at how to implement design thinking as part of their processes when looking at process improvement and this quote unquote digital transformation, and taking into consideration not only UX and pretty websites, but how to really deploy a positive customer experience that's going to end up delighting me and not just satisfying me.
Thank you, Bashir. And we're going to have a variety of perspectives on this panel because each of you have such different positions and how you interact with the utilities and the organizations that you work with, both from how the customer impacts technology and technology investments, and how the workforce, your workforce and your employees do that as well. So Corey, I'm going to pass it over to you. What are some of the key factors that you consider when evaluating investments regarding customers?
Well, I took some notes, Bashir, so I got a flow chart drawn out here after that. Thank you very much. It's helpful. From our end, I think in reality, we're always thinking about the customer. You kind of have to, getting input from someone like Bashir in terms of ways of thinking is always great. From our perspective, Paula Williams, our CEO, she brought with her when she took the role this people first mentality. And I think that's really helped us focus on the customer, our employees and retirees and everyone, and to kind of take that people first perspective. That's really manifested itself into what we call our guiding pillars. And it's really the prism through which we kind of filter our decision making. And, it's balanced, right? It's the things we consider around affordability, reliability, resiliency, the environment, kind of all underpinned with kind of this financial integrity element of it. So we try and be holistic in all of that. And inherent in that is thinking about the customer in all that we do. And I think the takeaway for us is balance in decision making. We don't want to over leverage any particular decision, on one of the pillars, or if a particular stakeholder has an interest, we want to kind of take that approach. So the example with calling in through a call center, it resonates with me just as a human being who's called call centers before. So that's a good example. But our investments are wide and varying. We make investments in generation. We have different conservation programs, and I think we try and balance being progressive in our thought and investment, but also taking into consideration all the other things that come with it. So for us, we've made a lot of progress in kind of solar, wind, and conservation efforts, but we've had to balance that up against maintaining affordable bills, and which we have some of the lowest combined electric and gas bills in the state, which isn't easy to balance that, and still having strong credit ratings, much like we do. I think that's all just kind of example of how we try and take a balanced approach to kind of all the decisions that we're doing. And looking forward, it's getting more complicated. And I think Bashir is right. With technology changing and evolving, we're looking at different things. And from a strategic standpoint, and you've probably heard Paula talk at other panels about our flexible path, which is really kind of a forward way of being flexible in terms of how we think about investments for our community at large. So all in all, I think, taking in inputs from every stakeholder and every perspective is important for us. But at the end of the day, when we make investments, whether we think about our customers, our employees, it really is a kind of a balanced approach in all of our perspectives.
You know, and if I can jump in real quick, you know, that something that Corey said made me think about how we're looking to, you know, connect with our customers. And I'd say historically, you know, utility companies often thought about the investments in the customer technology, often through the lens of through the utility processes. And again, it kind of gets back to Bashir's, you know, point around, you know, design-based thinking, where if you design your processes through how you think you need it as a utility business, you're going to really miss the opportunity to deliver value to your customers more quickly and to get to them what's really the goal of what you're trying to do overall. And a lot of times, you know, you start from the center of these large old customer systems, and you know the prospect of changing them to give the customer a better experience can be almost paralyzing, because the size of those investments are so significant, the complexity is so significant. But in today's digital technology world, there are so many new ways that you can, you know, give a wrapper of a technology solution, put a wrapper around your core systems and expose that to your customers to give them things that give them immediate value much more quickly. And so when we think about investments to our customer, we always are balancing what do we have to do at the core in order to make the core continue to be reliable and safe, but can we always try to think about putting something exposed to our customer so that they're also getting something helpful and meaningful from it. It could be, you know, introducing, you know, Venmo or a new pay capability without necessarily having to change the billing engine at the core. You know, can you add something that enables a contact center to get some of the information transferred to them from the IVR more quickly or efficiently, so that the customer's experience is a little bit more seamless. And so it's looking at it through that lens of saying, not only through how we run the business and how we think about it, but how our customers are looking at it.
Yeah, thank you, Pablo. Something you said actually leads into this next question I had for Bashir. Pablo, you just mentioned that the size of these investments sometimes can be paralyzing. So Bashir, the question for you is, how do you get technology embedded into an institution without feeling that paralysis, I suppose?
Yeah, well, I'm sure a lot of folks who are watching right now that are from the SI world and you know, companies like me aren't going to be happy with what I'm about to say, but it's part of the reality of where we are right now. So, well, technology isn't scary, right, at all, right? That's the first thing that utilities need to realize. And traditionally, utilities have the attitude that we're not a tech shop, we're a pipes and lines place, right? And we support meters, and that's all we do. And anything that's related to tech, I'll go hire company X, I'll pay them X amount of money, and they'll do it for me, and then they'll be accountable, and I'll always be able to kind of point my finger at them and say, why didn't you deliver for me, right? Well, personally, I believe that this attitude needs to change, and utilities really need to start looking at how they can start empowering their own team, becoming more disciplined, taking some of these initiatives more in-house than outsourcing and hiring third-party companies to actually do the work. They need to focus on putting in right training budgets and bringing in the right tools, techniques, and methodologies for them to be able to, you know, not have these projects cost X numbers of millions of dollars and reduce it and use those savings towards community improvement or helping low-income families or any other parts of their ecosystem that require, or potentially replacing pipes that need to be replaced or replacing lines that need to be replaced. So there's a lot of other improvements that the utilities could actually start spending money on if they reduce their total cost to external consulting support, right? So that's one part of it too, right? Another part of it is actually becoming a little bit more disciplined in how they do things and adopt more of an agile mindset, right? So having discipline and agile, most people say, well, how can you be disciplined and agile? Well, you can, right? There's an actual methodology specifically called Discipline Agile that allows you to be able to identify your way of work based on the context of your team, the context of the project that you're working in. What are the deadlines? How much time do I really have? What are my resources? And what are we trying to achieve? And once we basically look at that, right, and we empower our own team, now utilities can do something that they traditionally don't do, which is have an MVP mindset, right? So traditionally, we've been around projects that are all big bang, right? Because utilities are afraid of the increment-based type of rollout because they feel that things have to be fully baked, 100% done before you push something out to get the response or a behavioral reaction from whoever's consuming that product or service that you're pushing out to the market, right? Or internally to your customer base, right? So that's where, utilities really need to not fear failure, right? And I've said this line before: fail fast, pivot, and then try again, right? And by doing that, they'll realize that their teams are very well and prepared to support their needs. It becomes a lot more cost effective. You can move away from the large multi-year rollouts, and you can start gaining benefits of technology a lot sooner.
Thank you, Bashir. Do any of the other panelists have thoughts on that before I move on to the next question for Pablo? Okay, so Pablo, one of the big challenges of kind of adopting a new process, what Bashir was talking about, is employee culture and whether or not your employees are kind of willing to make this change in how you do things. Can you talk about how the changing workforce is affecting utilities' ability to kind of change how they do these rollouts?
Yeah, and I think that gets to a really, really critical question for the industry at large. And maybe one of the most significant risks that the industry is facing in the next decade, and that is around a changing and evolving workforce. If CPS is similar to NiSource and probably many other utility companies, the workforce makeup, it looks a lot like a barbell, where you've got a pretty significant portion of the demographics of the workforce having 30 plus 25, 35 years of experience, very seasoned employees, have grown up in the system with a way of working and with understanding how utility operations work. This is a workforce that historically has not leaned on technology in the same way that current generations lean on it. And so the way that they've operated the utility system has been in a way that has not as significantly leaned on technology from an operational point of view. And then you've got, the narrow part of the workforce, which is kind of those 10 to 20 year skilled employees. And they're at that transition point where technology is much more part of the day-to-day work, familiar, certainly part of the way that they think about both personal and work life. And then you've got your new generation coming into the workforce, your Gen Z, your younger millennials. And those people have grown up with technology from the outset. So they expect technology to be simple, to be effective. They expect it to be a part of all facets of their work life as it is in their personal life. They expect it to be reliable and usable and simple. And when they come into an organization that for decades has operated, or for centuries has operated in a much more manual, analog, non-digital way, it creates a set of expectations that the utility industry in many cases is not ready to meet. And that transition is a really significant and meaningful transition, not only from how you attract and retain the next generation of workforce, but actually how you prepare for the transition of knowledge from your existing workforce that isn't as comfortable with technology in many cases to those that expect it and need it and rely on it. And then that starts getting you into questions about not only the knowledge transfer challenges, which there's a lot of issues around that, but what are some of the operational challenges and operational risks that creates? Because you've got a lot of knowledge, tribal knowledge in the heads of decades long employees that you have to figure out how to put into support systems, performance support systems. You have to figure out how to embed it into training curriculums. And you have to figure out how to put it into the tools that the current generation is going to be using so that that knowledge can be leveraged and it can be done in a way that reflects how the current workforce is going to be working. And I think that shifting, generational expectation is such a unique and significant challenge in our industry, just because of the way that we've worked as an industry for so many decades. And I think that's going to be one of our biggest challenges to overcome. So I'd be interested in perspectives from others on the panel on this as well, if this is a common issue or if this is something that maybe is a little more specific in our parts of the world.
Yeah, so I'll chime in there, Pablo. I mean, from a description of a workforce, you did a pretty accurate job, and we have similarities, just like you mentioned. I think I think it's very interesting taking your comments and Bashir's comments and kind of putting them together, because there's implementing technology from our perspective, but what we've seen a lot lately, and maybe you have too, is our customers want a lot of technology that we're not comfortable with from their end. So it's not like us just doing something to make the experience better. It's about, I want this technology out in the field, and I want you to deliver my power this way. That's different. And the part that Bashir meant about fail fast, pivot, try again. That thought process aligns with what we started doing a couple of years ago, which was actually being able to pilot some of these new technologies to our customers that they want, so that we can figure it out. And that kind of accommodates the perspective, Pablo, that you mentioned, of folks that we don't rush into stuff generally. We're very deliberate and thoughtful, and you got to run it through a lot. So finding that balance for us was something very simple in terms of kind of enabling customer pilots. And for us, I mean, we got a couple going on, and they're out there. We got some electric vehicle pilots. We didn't just jump in and put a new product out there. We have some pilots testing them out. But it's a good opportunity for us, again, to kind of accommodate kind of the workforce and accommodate working out at the kinks, but still kind of addressing the fact that we got to move faster. We got to be able to pivot faster than we have in the past. We have customers asking for stuff. That stuff involves new technology. And so, we're not a tech company like anyone could be, that's a utility, but we've often said, we're tech enabled, right? The best we can. And so that's, I think, what we're trying to mesh together. But your observations are very right on with workforce, and Bashir, spot on with kind of the approach for trying to learn quickly and then kind of refine your products.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that, right? Because a great customer experience starts with an even better agent experience, right? So empowering our agents, or their front office, back office, field technicians, meter readers, whoever, right? With the right tool sets, knowledge bases, easy access to digital assets for them to see. For example, train our new folks using augmented reality on how to switch a meter, right? Or have those types of tools with them in the field if they're new, and not have to, reduce the overall risk of having those folks make operational problems that could potentially disconnect 1,000 people, right? So, and make them lose power. So having these types of digital assets and knowledge bases becomes very critical, and it takes time to actually capture that, categorize it, catalog it, and actually make it available for, all of your employee base. But then something that needs to happen even before that is, do we have the proper mechanisms in place to actually know how our employees are working? Do we really know if they're following our process? So sure, we can look at SLAs as a mechanism to say, sure, from a number perspective, but do we have true insight into how my agent is clicking, where they're stopping, where they're being blocked? Are they really answering the question in the best way? Is there really a proper first call resolution? Where do I need to focus on my training? That becomes also a big part of the problem too, right? So Pablo said something like, there's tribal knowledge, right? People have been there for a long time. They know it really fast. They don't go back to manuals and read it, but the new generation does. The new folks that are coming on, who don't have utilities experience, don't have the technology experience that the utilities are putting in front of them to use. Plus, let's just be real here. Most utilities don't have the most sexy tool sets for a new employee to come on and easily navigate to learn how to use it, right? So there's a learning curve that I have to go through as a new employee. Plus, on top of that, I have to learn the industry. Plus, on top of that, I have to learn how to deal with the different personas that my job forces me to work with on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot of different things at play here that tech can really help enable, right? So tech can really have, if you put the right tools in play, you can start having, heat maps to show process execution throughout the enterprise that can help you really start identifying where are their bottlenecks, where are their pain points, and what should we really be focusing our time and spend on, instead of it being well, I feel this could be where it is. Or just because this SLA told me something, that means I'm already assuming everything else that's happening in the background. So there's a little level of transparency and visibility that I feel utilities need to increase and have a better handle on. And then take all that knowledge and learn from it, and then figure out what are the best digital assets that we could put in front of the employees or also customers, to make sure that, again, you're giving a great overall experience.
I don't want to interrupt the flow too much, but I did want to make an announcement to the audience that we're going to take 10 minutes at the end of the panel to answer your questions. So go ahead and start sending those in via the chat box on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, and we'll get to those in about 10 minutes, and we'll start answering your audience questions. But Pablo, I want to pick up this thread where you guys just left off when we were talking on the prep call about this fail fast, pivot, try again. You had brought up that has impacts on cost and financials. What happens when you can train an employee faster in a better way? Or as Bashir just mentioned, you can really pinpoint from a cost perspective how these technologies are affecting you. So can you maybe just provide some of your thoughts on that? And then maybe Corey, you can chime in.
Yeah, that's a great question and topic. So, first off, I completely support and subscribe to the fail fast and pivot and try again, and fail even faster the second time and pivot and try again. It's a modern way of thinking about product design and development. It's a smart way to do it. I spent the first 11 years of my career in the consulting industry working for big systems integrators, and back in the day, the methodologies were much more waterfall based, traditional, design a system, get a bunch of requirements, put together some, high level models, then, code and develop, do extensive unit testing, system testing, speed testing, volume, all the kinds of things. And you could literally take a functional product from design to delivery and spend anywhere from 6 to 18 months, depending on the complexity and the size of the functional area that you were delivering software for. And imagine you get to the end of that cycle and it's just not right, and it's just off by a little bit or even by a lot. And the amount of time and rework and effort and frustration that goes into that from everybody's part, the people that are paying the bills, the people that are using the product, and people that are delivering it. So that was the way things were done before. Fail fast, pivot, and try again is the way things are being done more today. And it's critical that utilities move into and adopt this method. And we are, and I think for the large part, most modern utilities are today as well. And it has implications, especially on the financial side, when you think about the way utilities make money. So utilities make money through the investments that they make and the allowed authorized return on those investments. Most of our operations or our maintenance costs tend to be passed through. And so our customers pay the actual cost of what it costs to maintain and support the system. But when we make investments in our infrastructure, whether it's upgrading or replacing our pipelines or replacing our electric infrastructure and elements of the grid or building a new power plant or facility, those investments are what we make money on. And when you can invest in new digital assets and technology assets, those go into the assets of the business, and they are how a company makes money. And so the ability to quickly take concept to something that's in production and usable will facilitate the speed to which you're able to take that investment and look to seek a return on it and to get it recovered in rates and potentially to earn a return on it. So there's a real financial, meaningful implication of being agile as an organization. And also when you consider that the lifespan of a digital asset is much shorter than the lifespan of a traditional utility asset like a pipe or wire, you really want to get that into service and into rates so that you can get recovery for those investments quickly. That's one financial reason. The other is we live in a world today where the expectation of our employees and our customers is that you can get things much more quickly on demand. And the cycle of waiting 6 months or 9 months or even 12 months for something is an archaic thought to most employees and customers today. And so it's critically important from a cultural point of view to be able to shift into this mode of agile development to be able to get to speed to value. And so from utility, it makes financial sense, it makes cultural sense, and it certainly it aligns with the expectations of, I think, what our customers are looking for.
And Bashir, while you don't work at a utility, oh, sorry, Corey, did I cut you off?
No, hadn't started. Please go ahead.
Bashir, while you don't work at a utility, you've worked with a lot of utilities. have you seen the same things that Pablo was just talking about?
Yeah, we're definitely starting to see that, right? Working with, for example, Puget Sound Energy, they were running this program called Get to Zero, right? So they were trying to figure out how they could support their customers and their employees by augmenting their journeys through technology, right? How can we have a smart IVR that can basically deflect some of the calls and make the customer experience as great as possible and get the answer as fast as possible to the customer? How can we give tools and different types of things to pop up and support our agents while they're analyzing whether a high bill complaint or analyzing a customer complaint about, service disruption or anything else that's coming through? So we're definitely seeing a lot of utilities right now, look at different ways to embed Agile into their organization and to have that mindset. And we're seeing new types of roles being created, right? Director of digital delivery, we're seeing Agile coaches, we're seeing chief digital officers. So that shows you that, a lot of utilities are kind of thinking how, exactly what this panel is talking about is a new reality that you can't escape from. And we're actually very excited about that because it really plays in line with what we're trying to bring to the market.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a lot about perspective too, and kind of where you are wanting to make this change. I mean, there's adopting technology kind of internally to help us become faster and save costs and so forth. But then there's also that same perspective too on like the out-facing technology that the customer wants to use. And I think they've got different definitions of trying it fast and pivoting and failing. From a customer perspective, as a municipally owned utility, there's not that much leeway to fail too hard, from the customer end on some of the pilots we may run with them. Internally, that risk profile may look a little different as you're trying out new systems internally to save costs and so forth. So I think kind of the velocity of which we kind of approach that matters. And I know for us it does. I also think too, it depends on the type of organization too, on maybe how they're designed. As a municipally owned utility versus investor owned utility, you probably have different risk profiles and different stakeholders that you need to balance. But the lessons still are clear. The expectations of usability from employees and end customers still remains the same. And I think no matter what, it's top of mind, kind of no matter what your perspective.
For sure. And Corey, you mentioned you guys run pilots, right? And that's part of the learning process. To your point, depending on your risk profile, at what point do we say the pilot's ready to be pushed out to the customer, right? And then how to actually, segment your customers to identify which ones you want to, try this out with, and then have a proper surveying mechanism or monitoring mechanism to understand, well, how's it going? Where should we pivot? How should we change? Or if it's, failing, how to cut it off really fast before we, increase our risk and visibility to the customer. So it's awesome to hear that, that your organization is going through these types of different programs and pilots and getting the feedback from your customers.
So we have had a question come in from the audience, and I apologize that we got cut a little bit short because of technical difficulties at the beginning. I'll go to this audience question, and if we have time, I'll get back to some of the questions I have for you guys. So the audience question, Pablo, is for you. Do you think state regulators are valuing customer engagement technologies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's often a debate. I think that while it's an interesting debate, I think the debate is around the value of customer investments, I think is over, in my opinion. So there's been a debate, from the perspective that, some older school thinking that, regulated utilities in the traditional sense have really a captive customer base. And so if there's really not meaningful choice, what is the true value in an intense focus on the customer? And I've heard that debate and that question asked, many times over the course of my career. And the typical answer, with the technical answer, that I've heard as well, you have rate cases, and so the regulators really they value the perspective of what customers say. If there's a lot of customer complaints, they're going to be less inclined to be supportive of the rate case, and so therefore, investments that you maybe make on behalf of the customer, serve both the customer as well as serve the utility. And while that I think is technically correct, and I don't dispute that, I really think the more important issue is what it means to be a customer-centric organization and what elicits passion in the employees that you have, and the meaning of why you work for a utility company. And what I have found is that utility company employees largely do what they do because they value the service to the customer. They know what an important business that it is. Electric, gas, it provides life-sustaining services. And you see it at its highest point when there's problems with utility service, when a hurricane comes through or a snowstorm. But you really see that passion, live in your employees. And if as a business, you don't embrace that as one of the most important values of your business, you will never reflect in your employees the passion and the culture I think you want to have be a highly successful organization. To me, that's the value proposition of being a customer-centric organization. And while you will get probably maybe slightly better returns at your regulator, and I don't think regulators really do push back a lot on customer investments, and I do think they support them. I think the real reason and driver for doing it is because you want to build that kind of a culture to have a successful organization in the long run. It's a great question, and it's one that I've heard a lot over the years.
Thanks, Pablo. Does anyone else on the panel have something to add in response to that question? Okay, so the last question I wanted to ask you guys, and we have about 5 minutes left. Corey, I'll ask you first, because I know something we wanted to talk about today or cover was how utilities can do a better job of leveraging risk more effectively in the investments they make. So Corey, that is my question to you. How can utilities make investments that leverage risk more effectively, kind of in the context of today's conversation?
Yeah, I think, CVS's modern history is really one around diversification. We've diversified, our generation fleet, which, we've got solar, wind, we have a lot of that. We still have natural gas, coal, and nuclear. And, that's been something that's been meaningful to us over the years. Now, looking forward, the whole industry is transitioning, right? And, technology's changing, customers have different expectations, the grid's changing, et cetera, all of that. So what we're still trying to do as we look forward is still taking a balanced approach, but recognizing that the cycle time on all of that technology is different, number one. And so, but we don't want to dive in all on one thing either. We got a balance between solar, wind. We have a lot of conservation programs through our community, through our Save for Tomorrow energy program, but we didn't go all in on one of them. We got dozens of different programs that we, had investments that paid off. But the part of that actually works a lot too is partnerships, where you can get third-party partnerships that helps offset some risk and kind of shares the success with everyone. We have a recent pilot that we're doing. It's a resiliency product that involves a third party, and it's a win for everyone, our end customer, ourselves, and the third party themselves. And it has the multiplier effect of reducing cost to a customer, reducing capital investment from us, but still giving the customer what they needed, which was a particular service that was leveraging new technology that didn't exist today. We otherwise wouldn't have gotten in and done that. And so that's probably like a really great example of how we manage that investment. But I'd say too, we're at a point now, as everyone's kind of discussed, that is very much in transition. So, we have our creative juices flowing. And so it's balanced against put up against this balanced approach we've had as a utility with a lot of creative ideas. And we're always looking for new and innovative ways to get to the future. And I think part of the flexible path that we've talked about, and which is really predicated in us having flexibility in what the future business model looks like, and that it will look different than what we have today, and that's okay. But we still need to be thoughtful in that approach. So there's risk out there no matter what you do. But the best way, I think you can balance that is through diversification, partnerships where you can, and embracing the new technology that proves itself in the short term.
All right, we have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to go ahead and let everybody take 1 minute or so, try to keep it to a minute, for just closing thoughts on today's conversation. And Bashir, I'll start with you.
Well, I have to say this was awesome, very educational, and it was great to hear from Corey and from Pablo. From my perspective, I just, again, feel that we're at a really awesome point right now as an industry, right? Customers, our expectations are changing, employees' expectations are changing. And the great thing is that the utilities are listening, right? And that's the most important part. So it's like I said, very exciting time. And yeah, looking forward to be part of a next panel like this.
Thanks, Bashir and Pablo.
Thanks, Aaron, and again, a big thanks to Bashir and Corey as well. What I take away from this conversation is that there's just a lot of different ways to think about how you approach the investments in technology and the digitization of the workforce, as well as customer-facing technology. There's a lot more options out there, and the companies like Bashir's that are innovating, bringing challenging the status quo, challenging the former ways of design thinking and the ways that we have deployed technologies as an industry. It's great to see the challenge continuing, the innovation continuing, and that this is a really dynamic place that we're in, and we have to stay tuned. And it's forums like this that help keep us abreast of what's happening. And I appreciate the participation of the audience, as well as the opportunity to learn through this discussion. So thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Pablo. And Corey, you will close us out.
All right, great. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, and it was great to be on this panel. It was great to speak with Pablo and Bashir. A lot of excellent things to learn. I think part of my takeaway just in listening to this conversation is about those in leadership positions remaining open-minded to new ways of thinking and being flexible, and then ultimately recognizing we can all learn from each other. We all have our own unique experiences, and I think, again, just from this conversation and in my experience, that's how we all get better and we all learn. So hopefully this panel helped out with all those participants. So again, appreciate the opportunity.
Well, great comments are coming through in the chat. So great job, you guys. That wraps us up. I am going to go ahead and send things back over to Chris Moyer to take us to a transition.